Greetings all, and welcome back to A Traveler's Guide 2. We're going to be wrapping up a look at the worlds that are affected by the Phazon Crisis today, and in particular, we'll be looking at the remnants of a ship that only the bravest of explorers should visit, and a world that thankfully, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists. So buckle up for our final report on this one, A Traveler's Guide to the GFS Valhalla and Phaaze. The GFS Valhalla was the fifth ship to come out of the Federation shipyards of Alias 3 with an Aurora unit installed in it, and was first launched in the year 2066 in the service of the Galactic Federation. It served its purpose well and was given high praise overall, especially since its attached controller, Aurora Unit 313, was able to command the ship for a brief period of time during the Battle of Horus 4 after the entire bridge was slain during an attack. The Valhalla was also the flagship of the 13th Fleet, and its home port was Phaaze, though it seems they will never get the chance to go back to port ever again. 4 months prior to the start of the Phazon Crisis, the Valhalla was on a training mission in the Clar Nebula, a scarlet-colored nebula with a highly irregular, practically organic form, containing red blood cell-shaped pockets of gas and dust, and glowing threads of an unknown ionized gas, when it was attacked by Phazon space pirate forces with the intention of stealing the Aurora unit for their own uses. The green recruits that boarded the ship from Phaaze were no match for the numerous space pirates, Phazon-based weaponry, and Phazon metroids they brought with them to the attack, and the entire crew was killed. What bodies were not being turned into Phazon by growths in the ship, otherwise stuck in the more secluded parts of the structure, were jettisoned into space, and the wrecked ship was left to rot forever. The Hunter travel tool was left with the ship in the Gaflar system, and had used energy cells she had collected from other planets in order to access the different parts of the ship. While the ship was still very much dead in terms of its original crew, and was in a terribly mangled state, the ship had also become the home for many different Phazon-based monsters, and even a few atomics, creating an extremely hostile environment overall. Despite the destruction though, the Hunter was able to fight through the Phazon-powered monsters occupying the ship, and a Metroid hatcher in the Aurora chamber, where the Aurora unit once lay, and made it a spot where the Phazon space pirates had crashed into it and left a pod with the pirate command codes in its systems. The Hunter was eventually able to use these stolen pirate command codes to take control of the Leviathan battleship that had been orbiting the pirate homeworld, allowing the Galactic Federation to use it to open a wormhole straight to Phaaze to launch a final full-scale assault against the Phazon space pirates. Though the Valhalla's crew may not have been able to fight off the attack, the remains of this once proud ship remind everyone of their brave valor and their willingness to fight against the odds, even if they were nothing more than easy pickings for battle-hardened space pirates. While this location has a number of creatures that have already been covered in previous reports, including Phazon metroids, atomics, liquid Phazon grubs, and metroid hatchers, there are also some that have yet to be talked about, so let's take a close look at this abandoned wreck and see whether the monsters dwell within it. For reasons that are still not understood well, when metroid eggs were exposed to extremely high levels of Phazon radiation before hatching, they would undergo premature asexual reproduction from beta ray exposure and were born as several monsters called mini-roids from a single egg. These creatures were heavily immature as a result of having to share the resources intended for just a single creature in a single egg, and completely lacked any and all ability to attack others. In fact, their purple bodies was slightly smaller than a normal infantile metroid, lacked internal nuclei completely, and was so weak that it could be destroyed with a single shot from any type of weapon. As a result of their incredibly weak state, these creatures intended to travel in massive swarms for protection. Only a few may ever absorb enough Phazon energy to reach the next stage of development. The sheer power that they did earn when they reached their adult form more than made up for their incredibly weak infant stage. Still, as in that state, they were totally defenseless, and without any real way to harm others outside direct physical contact, they are best classified within threat level alpha. Phazon shriekbats were much more aggressive than their other relatives, and were readily distinguished by their elongated centipede-like body form, which was barely kept aloft by the bizarrely small and nearly non-functional wings. Their disgusting insect-like body was beyond offsetting, but what really made them a problem was the fact that they had to come to feed off of Phazon and Phazon alone as an energy source. As such, these creatures released a burst of Phazon energy when they died, and could thus make this small detonation highly lethal to most types of smaller life forms, making them worth taking out immediately before they can become a problem. Thankfully for most, this type of shriekbat is now totally extinct, and given that their behavior was otherwise unchanged compared to other types of shriekbats, they still only have a place within threat level alpha. Phazon hoppers were the result of hoppers being exposed to large amounts of Phazon radiation, transforming the outer skin and making them much more aggressive than normal. In mutating into this form, these creatures grew a massive crystal of Phazon on their backs, while the rest of their carapace thickened and became adorned with additional Phazon crystals, granting them severely enhanced defenses and much better offensive power. While the basic leaping attack was about the same, the venom had been enhanced with Phazon energy and was thus much more corrosive than it normally would have been. In addition, these creatures had the ability to actually enter a hyper mode state, which not only increased their defensive and offensive power, but allowed them to generate small energy shockwaves as they leapt across the ground, making them even more threatening to face in close quarters. Despite all this added power though, these creatures could still be destroyed with sustained gunfire, and relatively simple-minded, but they nonetheless needed to be approached with caution, as there was no telling when or where they would enter hyper mode and make themselves a serious threat. This was made only further problematic, considering that they tended to attack in packs, and were some of the few creatures known to be capable of living in large colonies on places like Phaaze, usually in physical hives made out of hardened Phazon. But they still had the same behavioral limitations seen in their other brethren, thus placing them within threat level beta. Compared to the Ing that once roamed Dark Aether, Phase Ings were not true Ings in the traditional sense, but they were still counted as such as they were the life forms that served as the basis for the creation of the Ing when Leviathan impacted planet Aether many decades ago. These morphing pools of living Phazon were able to move around as amorphous blobs on just about any type of surface, and were very difficult to hurt, as a result of the only weak point being the semi-solid body form, and they never took this form unless you're preparing to launch a global Phazon energy at a target. These creatures were surprisingly resistant against attack, much more so than England's descendants, but they were also weak to physical stress and could actually be pulled apart if attacked with a grapple lasso strike. They might have had the advantage of distance when it came to firing the projectiles from afar, but these annoying creatures were still relatively easy to defeat and should not have been seen as a dire threat in any situation, especially if one is able to absorb energy from them before forcefully ripping them apart. As such, these creatures belong within the confines of threat level alpha, and didn't need to be a massive issue to most, even if they were responsible for the near destruction of the Luminoth on Aether. The GFS Valhalla is a unique case here, as the actual threat it poses to explorers really depends on what parts of the timeline is really being looked at for it. On the one hand, at the time the Hunter first came upon the wreck, it is pretty clear to see that the sheer number of Phazon-based monsters dwelling within it made it a highly dangerous place for even her to explore, and even if there wasn't an extremely dangerous threat to be had on its own, the sheer sight of numbers of these monsters and the wrecked form and bodies within the ship itself made it a terrifying place to explore alone. However, now that the source of all Phazon has been destroyed, and Phazon itself in turn, aside from a few atomics wandering parts of the ship, it really is just a derelict ghost ship in space, and thus today is actually safe to explore for the most part. Though the terror of its isolation and the thought of what really went down here nonetheless could give many a pause for thought before examining the ship's remains. And now, ladies and gentlemen and all others, let's end this look into the Phazon Crisis by examining the planet that started it all and ended it all at the hands of the Hunter, Phaaze. Phaaze was perhaps one of the greatest mysteries to ever exist in the cosmos, and although its true origins and powers may never be fully revealed, there is no doubt that its destruction was a welcome one in the hearts and minds of the entire universe. Orbiting a small star 361 light-years away from Galactic Federation space, the main feature that made Phaaze different from all the planets known to exist at that time was that it, as strange as it may seem, was alive. In fact, it was more than just alive. It was a conscious, sentient being, and it wished to continue ensuring the survival and prosperity of itself and the many creatures that were born of its womb. The planet was entirely made out of Phazon and displayed the strange and varied forms the substance could take, the many life forms that once existed on its surface either being the result of the Phazon space pirates bringing new creatures to mutate and breed on the surface, or so bizarre and alien that they can only be seen on Phaaze with no known counterparts in the universe. The reproductive cycle of the planet is dictated by the creation of Leviathans, which are essentially living seeds born with the power to create wormholes to travel to the most distant ends of the universe in order to spread the corruption of Phazon, firing off these seeds out of the planet's surface every 100 years. Though Dark Samus was eventually able to control the planet through Aurora Unit 313 and forced the planet to start producing Leviathans at an accelerated rate. Because Phaaze was so distant, its existence remained a mystery to seemingly the entirety of the known universe. Even the Chozo were not aware of his existence, though a Chozo searcher satellite did briefly catch glimpses of his existence many centuries ago for too brief of a moment to really study it until the planet was rediscovered by Aurora Unit 217 near the end of the Phazon Crisis. As such, the limited information that's available on its surface, form, and biota are taken solely from the brief records taken by the Hunter and the Phazon space pirates and their respective journeys to the planet. Aside from the creatures that had once been brought by the Phazon space pirates, there are a few other interesting life forms worth mentioning here that are only known to exist on the Twisted Planet. The phase fungus present on the surface and inner caverns of the planet was not the same as the Phazon fungus seen elsewhere, as it possessed a slightly different overall structure. These masses of tissue were distinguished from other plant and fungal forms of Phaaze by the large pulsating spores, which emitted a stench of decay that could be detected from several meters away. The mass possessed several small tentacles on its form that drew Phazon energy from the air of the planet and used it to energize the fungus, allowing it to release spores on a near constant basis. Glow stems, which are structurally similar to the guide stems of Talon 4, were also quite common to see on the planet, which were bioluminescent plants with the appearance of a sea anemone that was surprisingly resistant against the effects of radiation. This may explain why they gave off concentrated amounts of Phazon radiation, as they actively wiggled around to gather Phazon from the atmosphere of the planet before converting it into biological energy they could use. A Phazon mass was a hardened Phazon-based flower bud that only bloomed every 100 years in accordance with the launching of Leviathans, and the rest of the time it was present in a semi-open stage, where the creature could absorb Phazon energy in the air for sustenance. The outer shell of the structure was effectively impermeable with normal weapons, but the base of the flower was connected to a series of similarly shaped growths that are not as well armored. Overloading the growths with energy from the hyperball could cause them to explode and send a concentrated burst of energy into the central flower, destabilizing its hardened shell and ultimately destroying it once all connected growths were burst. The Azalean was a large abnormal lifeform with 5 violet eyes, a massive beak-like jaw, a series of jointed grasping appendages on the other side of its jaw, and a pair of large hands with massive claws that the beast used to catch its prey. It seemed to have been a sedentary predator, as a result of it being embedded into the frame of the hatcher's shaft, and it was relatively slow moving to attack. The hunter was able to get the creature to release its grip by repeatedly firing her Phazon hyperbeam into its mouth, causing an overload of energy that destroyed all of its eyes and caused it to wail out in pain. The maw refers to a strange creature the hunter encountered while falling down the drop shaft. At the bottom of the shaft was a raised, pulsating nodule tissue with a large, bright blue mouthpart that extended out of what was likely a much larger creature than what was visible as she fell down. The creature seemed impervious to attack, though it seemed to show pain when hurt from inside with the hyperball. Phazon tendrils could be found at the Caravan Alpha of the planet, and while these strange creatures did not really move at all, normal contact with them would ensnare the hunter and start to increase her Phazon level rapidly unless she could roll by them in morph ball form, as the tendrils could not attach readily to smooth surfaces. Even the doors to the planet were not safe, as there existed a creature known only as the Eyeball Blocker that served as a living door with a circular mouth in the center of the structure that apparently used to feed off the planet's atmosphere. The entity revealed a small optical organ from around the door frame periodically to observe its surroundings, and direct damage to these nodules as they appeared would eventually cause the creature to overload and release its optical organs from all 5 surrounding holes, quickly being dispatched with a few more Phazon hyperbeam shots afterwards. Lastly, it is rumored that there is a rare species of salamander that hitched a ride from the Phazon space pirates and became a native of the planet by accident, and although its existence was never officially confirmed, it is assumed that it was probably like the Lumagek and was only a real threat in large numbers. The hunter was able to fight through all the monsters set in her way, and even killed a Leviathan infant near the end before coming face to face finally with Dark Samus in the planet's sanctum. The very heart of the world is built by Dark Samus' cohorts, and what was meant to be the beginning of an entire citadel built in her honor. The two beings engaged in a fierce battle that is poised to set the stage for the future of Phazon, and with the power of the Phazon hyperbeam on her side, the hunter was able to repulse her dark twin. Desperate to destroy her nemesis once and for all, Dark Samus merged with Aurora Unit 313 and became the physical and mental embodiment of the entire planet. The hunter was pushed to her limit against its final form, but it too was still unable to get the job done, and the ensuing overload of energy completely and utterly destroyed Dark Samus and the corrupted Aurora unit. Because the two entities had become the mind and heart of the planet, with their end, the planet was unable to maintain its sentience independently and thus keep itself alive, leading to the entire world to start collapsing right before everyone's eyes. With the corruption removed from her suit, the hunter was able to escape along with the surviving remnants of the Galactic Federation's 7th Fleet, and through the final wormhole created by the Phazon Space Pirates Leviathan battleship, leaving the rest of the Phazon Space Pirate forces and the Leviathan to perish from the massive shockwave that issued forth from the explosion of Phaaze. With this conclusion, the Phazon Crisis was over, and all Phazon to ever exist in the known universe vanished, as the hunter had killed the planet that once lived and breathed as a scourge and abomination to all life in general. Let's give our data archives one final spin around the wheel with this look into the unique entities that call this bizarre living world home, alongside other Phazon-based lifeforms that have been spoken on previously. The tangleweed and its close genetic relative, the venomweed, are a unique type of plant life that comes in a variety of forms across the known universe, including a mutant strain that once existed on Phaaze, but otherwise shares the same basic biology and feeding characteristics. Why it is that so many similar species exist on so many planets, however, has yet to be fully determined. The tangleweed is a plant form that is sentient to some degree, as it will actively use its own body in order to gather food outside of sunlight, since it usually cannot grow in areas that have a lot of direct sunlight exposure. The brightly colored leaves of these plants are designed to attract prey items from afar, but what the prey do not realize until it is too late is that each tangleweed arm is also coated with microscopic barbs that ensnare and inject a paralyzing toxin in their prey item shortly after they land on the tangleweed. Once the prey has been immobilized, these plants will release digestive juices from their bodies and will wrap around the prey item, liquefying them into a form they can then suck up through small pores in their body. While the poison from the traditional tangleweed is strong enough to kill small creatures, it is nowhere near powerful enough to even harm larger creatures. As a result, the most that a patch of tangleweed can do to a larger target is weakly wrap around it and slow the movement speed until they get out of the patch. If a patch of tangleweed is proving to be a problem though, getting rid of them for a while is pretty easy, as exposure to light or damage of any sort will cause the affected tangleweed arm and nearby members in the patch to retract back into the ground, enabling safe passage for a short period of time. As such, overall, these plants are fairly easy for explorers to examine and come into contact with, and shouldn't be a real threat for most, so I'm comfortable saying that they belong in threat level Alpha. The gel sac was an unusual Phazon-based lifeform that possessed a mollusk-like body form, especially in regards to their mouth and eye structure, but were differentiated from other mollusks by the 6 arthropod-like legs. While the 4 legs that the creature used for walking were very small and thin, the 2 front appendages on its body had fairly large claws they used to dig into rocks containing Phazon ore, which the beast regularly dined on as their only natural food source. The creatures were not able to move very fast as a result of their short stubby legs, but they were nonetheless one that most would want to avoid as a result of their explosive personalities. The gel sac was a highly aggressive creature despite its otherwise cutesy appearances, and it was extremely dangerous to be around because its primary means of offense could oftentimes prove fatal to those around it. When these entities were perturbed while roaming their territory into feeling like their territory was under attack, they would begin to inflate a fleshy sac on the top of their bodies, filling it with a caustic Phazon-based venom that could quickly seep through open skin and even corrode metal. They would continue to expand their bodies until the soft tissue of the sac could not take the internal pressure and exploded, sending a spray of the deadly venom in all directions while killing the gel sac at the same time. This ultimate end was usually in the favor of the gel sac community, as they matured to reproductive age very quickly after they were born and could thus afford to lose some members, but it is known that this same attack could be triggered by pumping them full of energy from beam weapons to agitate them from afar. Doing so not only ensured that the creature killed itself in its explosive attack, but did so in a safe distance away, and thus made it a relatively mild threat at best. If forced to fight them in close quarters though, caution would be highly recommended, as their explosive attacks had a deceptive range to them that could easily catch explorers off guard if they couldn't remove themselves from its general area before it popped, and thus have a secure position within threat level Beta. Phazon parvus are creatures that are only ever observed on Phaaze, and have been so radically mutated by the presence of Phazon that they inherit powers and behaviors radically different than any of their relatives. Instead of feeding on small microorganisms in the air, these creatures, not surprisingly, fed off of Phazon for energy, but they were such voracious predators they would actively drain the Phazon energy from nearby targets to fuel themselves. In doing so, however, these creatures still retain knowledge of the weak body shield, and so use this power to actually fuel their own offenses and attack anything that was in the range of their detection. As they absorbed energy, these entities would also concentrate much of it into a single point, and once the energy level reached a critical state of destabilization, they fired the excess energy as a devastating beam of Phazon energy, critically hurting anything and everything that was in the immediate vicinity of their body. Thankfully though, these creatures were still rather weak and highly susceptible to damage from Phazon-based weapons, and were ultimately destroyed along with all of the Phazon-based lifeforms with the annihilation of Phaaze, and for that, a place within threat level Beta is still applicable. The Leviathan Infant was the ultimate child of Phaaze, and was the sole reason why the planets of Talonfor, Aether, Brio, Elysia, and the pirate homeworld were devastated and rendered a nightmarish land devoid of the bright life that once occupied them. These creatures began life as semi-large slug-like creatures within a serpentine organ called a Leviathan womb. This organ was usually quite stable structurally, but the sides of it could be pulled off with enough force, like with a grapple lasso strike, revealing the Leviathan Infant on the inside to direct attack. Despite the small size and unstable nature of the physical form, which can cause a massive explosion if they are killed while still in the infant stage, these creatures, with only 4 small limbs to swim around in and the semi-fluid interior of the Leviathan womb, were incredibly resilient against the effects of Phazon, and thus could be extremely hard to kill. But seeing as they would eventually grow up to be a Leviathan, this incredible resilience is not wholly unexpected. If allowed to grow and develop normally, these entities remained in the Phazon womb until they absorbed so much of the substance that they finally developed a Phazon core that can self-generate Phazon on its own without requiring any further input from external sources. Once the core had been developed, the creature would have entered its adolescent stage and would slowly move up in the world as it approached the surface of the planet. Here, the bioform would continue to grow and mature beneath its older siblings elsewhere on the planet, developing a number of specialized structures, including optical organs easily irradiated by weapon fire, and that allow them to see their own insides to study and pick up parasitic intruders in their body, so they could target and remove them from the body as they develop. Only reaching full maturity the moment that it reached the surface as the Leviathans above were slowly launched into space, again on a cycle of every 100 years. At full maturity, these entities had a physical structure that was both silicon and Phazon based, and were covered in patches of rock like phasite with long tentacles growing out of their sides. Inside, the creatures possessed a number of Phazon generating and visual organs inside of the cave-like inner body that was only fully exposed after the specimen reached its destination after being released from Phaaze. As the creature sat near the surface, Phaaze used an advanced and wholly alien extrasensory power to scan the cosmos and locate a suitable planet for corruption, namely one that was filled with life. Once a target had been acquired, the Leviathan would be fired from the crust of the planet in the direction of that world. Away from Phaaze, however, these creatures would slowly begin to degrade, so they needed to get to their target planet quickly before they expired. To do this, these creatures had developed an organic warp drive that allowed them to create wormholes they could then travel through to severely cut the travel time down to just a fraction of what it normally would have been, giving the Leviathan seed, as called by the Phazon space pirates, just enough time to impact the planet and die. Shortly before Leviathan died, however, it would enthrall a local bioform and use Phazon as bait, mutating the creature and brainwashing it to stave the reward of continued Phazon exposure and corruption, creating a guardian that would loyally protect the Phazon core, which had the appearance of an insectoid head with mandibles, Phazon growths, and several eyes, inspired connected to Leviathan by a series of cords, of the now deceased Leviathan for the rest of time. At this point, the Phazon core became nearly traced to the original Leviathan, even though it's not considered to be alive itself despite its lively appearance, and after it made a guardian, the core would extend its form and seep into the ground, using a series of thick glands in Leviathan's body to generate a steady stream of Phazon and wrap and warp all the local and global rock material until it all slowly converted to Phazon. The final stage of this process was the creation of a new Phaaze, a duplicate of the original world, which too would start to produce its own Leviathans and start the process all over again. Aside from the Guardian itself, the Phazon core is able to create Phazon-based obstacles and structures in the shell of the Leviathan that act as a lock system. The destruction of these items would cause a massive outflow of Phazon energy that would disrupt the core and force it to move out of the ceiling of the Leviathan corpse and swing down to view its attacker. This is the only time that the Phazon core was susceptible to damage, but even then, it required an enormous amount of Phazon energy to overload and destroy them. It is still not uncertain exactly how many worlds were changed to such over the long lifespan of Phaaze's existence, but it is hoped that all of them were either destroyed or at the very least cleansed of their corruption with the destruction of the original Phaaze, as there are few of the fates that could be thought of as scary and cruel as a nightmare's transmutation of life and non-life into something that could not even be classified under those basic terms. It is lastly mentioned that one particular Leviathan, under the control of the space pirates, was actually converted into a battleship for use in actual combat and not just to infect other worlds. Biologically, the Leviathan battleship possessed all the same features seen in normal Leviathans, but its body had been changed on the inside to include crew quarters, command consoles, and cybernetic weapons to make it into a fighter that could have easily destroyed anything that got in its way. The ship was used by the Phazon space pirates for some time, transporting them and their cargo to and from Phaaze, and acting as the flagship for their armada, but they were not able to maintain control over it forever. After Omega Ridley was defeated by the Hunter and the Leviathan Sea of the pirate homeworld was destroyed, she was able to locate the warp transport system to the Leviathan and, using the pirate command code she had uploaded from the wreckage of the GFS Valhalla, was able to take full control over the vessel. From there, the Galactic Federation used the creature to open a wormhole to Phaaze, where the Federation's Sun Fleet went up against what was left of the Space Pirate Armada, and where the Hunter would journey to the planet of Phaaze and end the Phazon Crisis and all Phazon in the known universe once and for all. As a whole, from the lifestyle all the way to the death and beyond, Leviathans were monstrous creatures that rode the fine line between what can be considered alive and not. And while they might have been all but defenseless when in an infant state, they nonetheless have been the cause of more than a few galactic scourges in their time, and likely many more we may never even know about, and in turn cannot be given any sort of ranking below that of their own category, namely threat level, goodbye tourism. In the conclusion of the events on Aether, the Galactic Federation made expeditions to the planet to establish peaceful communications with the Luminoth and took back samples of Phazon from the space pirate base there, which was studied and eventually used to create PED technology. When the Galactic Federation was not looking, however, the space pirate crew of the battleship Colossus stole the remaining Phazon reserves and headed out for space, with no clue as to what to do next. Unbeknownst to them, however, they had a stowaway in their ship. Though Dark Samus has seemingly been destroyed right before the end of Dark Aether, her body had become so finely tuned to the power and energy of Phazon that it had retained her sentience, and absorbing all the Phazon that was stored in the battleship, Dark Samus was able to resurrect herself in a stable form, with her chaotic and unpredictable personality finally under control. The malevolent deity used her power to kill about a third of the space pirates on the ship, and used Phazon corruption to warp the minds of the others, convincing them to diligently follow her every order and whim. She taught the surviving crew how to use Phazon to power the ship, and then left on a journey to find the true source of her power. It took several months for Dark Samus to catch a break, but a break she did indeed catch when she came upon a Leviathan and took control of it by infecting it with her personal brand of Phazon and forcing it to teleport her to the place she had been searching for. The planet Phaaze, the source of all Phazon in the known universe. She returned with the Leviathan to the crew of the Colossus and, after the Space Pirates demonstrated their loyalty to her by converting the Leviathan into a living battleship, directed them to follow her to Phaaze with the Leviathan in front. Upon them arriving at Phaaze, she revealed that she had desire to not only take over the planet, but to also take over the gestation chambers where Leviathans were born in order to create them at an extremely accelerated pace. She needed a way to take control of the whole planet symbiotically without forcing her to actually become part of the world. She needed something she could transfer her essence through, and there was an easy solution for her and the Space Pirates: an Aurora unit. As such, the crew of the Colossus located and attacked the GFS Valhalla, who were to send out on a training mission filled with green recruits, making it an easy target for them. The Space Pirate forces attacked and killed the entire crew, jettisoning many of their bodies into space and removing Aurora Unit 313 from its base. The Aurora unit was then corrupted with Phazon and directly plugged into the heart of Phaaze. The biomechanical machinery of the Aurora unit and the sentient nature of Phaaze itself harmonized perfectly and in turn granted Dark Samus the power needed to fully control the planet, its existence linked permanently to her and her alone. As a reward for their efforts, the first Leviathan that Dark Samus launched was directed at the homeworld of what would eventually be called the Phazon Space Pirates that assisted her. The rest of their kind had no idea of the Leviathan's existence, and when it crash landed on their world, it quickly began to corrode it with Phazon and killed most of the native life forms. The Space Pirate forces that were left were brainwashed by Dark Samus as well, conquering the first planet in her game of galactic domination. Following this, Dark Samus launched 3 more Leviathans into nearby star systems. The first was sent to Norian because of the strong ties with the Galactic Federation, but with the help of the Hunter and the bounty hunter Rundus, Gore, and Gandreda, the Galactic Federation was able to hold back the invasion as they planned to use an orbital defense cannon to destroy the Leviathan before it could impact. Eager to end the lives of her enemies, Dark Samus had followed the Norian Leviathan and confronted all 4 bounty hunters in battle. The 4 of them did their best to harm Dark Samus, but she had grown so powerful that no form of conventional weaponry seemed to be capable of actually doing any damage, let alone hitting her. In a display of her newfound power, Dark Samus charged up and fired a ludicrously massive blast of Phazon energy that corrupted and knocked nearly all of the bounty hunters out cold before leaving, confident that Norian was finished. However, the Hunter was able to input the launch sequence on the control panel to activate the orbital defense cannon in time to successfully destroy the Leviathan, but she quickly collapsed from the damage she had taken. As noted previously, a month later, the Hunter awoke from a coma only to find out that Dark Samus had done more than just irradiated her with Phazon. She had effectively forced the growth of a corrupted nodule in the Hunter's body that had begun to self-generate Phazon, effectively making Dark Samus and the Hunter more similar than ever before. A variant of the PED suit had been installed in her in the process to allow her to use this power for good, and was not given a choice in the matter, as Dark Samus had essentially been rendered immune to damage from every type of firepower except Phazon itself, the only substance capable of harming a creature comprised of it. The 3 other bounty hunters had been similarly infected and equipped with modified PED suits of their own, but something had gone wrong. Rundus and Gore had been sent off to investigate the planet's Brio and Elysium respectively, as they had both been hit by Leviathans while the whole group had been in a coma, and Gandreda had been sent off to find the pirate homeworld, but all 3 had essentially dropped off the radar and were no longer in contact. The Hunter journeyed to these planets and found that their allies had been corrupted by Phazon by the influence of Dark Samus. It was her intention to use her new power to corrupt the strongest fighters under the Galactic Federation's payroll, and almost all of them eventually fell under her influence. But the Hunter's mental training from the Chozo allowed her to maintain her mind even as the Phazon growth in her body continued to grow in size and power. She was forced to terminate Rundus, Gore, and Gandreda, but in their depths, the shadowy specter of Dark Samus' presence finished killing them every time and took the latent powers for her own use, though the Hunter was still able to acquire their powers at the same time. Despite these tragic losses, the Hunter was able to cleanse Brio, Elysia, and the pirate homeworld of their Phazon corruption, and ultimately located the transport to the Leviathan battleship that had been parked in orbit around the pirate homeworld. She used the stolen Leviathan command codes to take control of the Leviathan and, using its wormhole generator, led the Galactic Federation into the space surrounding Phaaze, where the Galactic Federation finally commenced war against the Phazon space pirate forces near the planet, where the Hunter sneaking past the ensuing battle and landing on Phaaze by herself. In coming in direct contact with Phaze's atmosphere, however, she became overcharged with Phazon and was placed in a permanent state of hyper mode. With this extreme power indefinitely at her disposal, seemingly until death, the hunter fought her way through the Phazon power monsters located in the planet's deepest pits, ultimately arriving in the Sanctum of Phaaze, where she at last confronted Dark Samus for the final time. In her new form, Dark Samus' armor had changed significantly into a more streamlined, leathery form that gave a much stronger impression the suit was the equivalent of skin for her, and thus existed with her as a single body of living Phazon. In the total summation of her powers, Dark Samus had access to a scattershot Phazon beam weapon, an intense plasma beam laser used by her and her doppelgangers known as Dark Echoes, in sync in the air or rotating around each other near the ground, obviously granted her from absorbing Gore's power, homing bursts of Phazon that could be destroyed with precise aiming, an organic energy shield of organic Phazon tendrils, the power to strike the floor and send a wave of Phazon energy across the surface of the floor in a straight line, likely modified from the stolen powers of Gandrada, the power to summon massive pillars of crystallized Phazon, likely modified from Runus' Ice Pillar attack, and the ability to use a Shine Spark attack to strike the ground and stun a massive wave of Phazon energy. In addition, as just noted, Dark Samus had the ability to generate what were called Dark Echoes, effectively Phazon mimics of herself with access to all of her basic attacks, as well as a physical swarming attack against targets, simply involving them moving around each other rapidly to inflict repeated physical trauma, but that were otherwise easily destroyed, which may be why she almost always attacked at least two of them in concert in the later stages of her fight with the Hunter. The Fiend went even so far as to try and absorb energy straight from Phaaze in order to replenish her own, and used her doppelgangers as decoys to try and make sure she was not blasted out of the recovery phase, but she could easily be differentiated from her clones with X-ray Visor technology. Lastly, it is worth noting that if she chose to absorb her Dark Echoes, she would enter a temporary state of Super Hyper Mode, in which she became completely immune to all forms of damage, so her unstable state prevented her from keeping this form for very long. This by far was the most powerful form that Dark Samus ever took in her battle with the Hunter, and combined both the powers of the bounty hunters she corrupted, and perhaps the most powerful weapons that a Phazon-based life form could ever possibly have. And because of this, her power and overall threat was more than unparalleled, easily elevating her to threat level Dark Control. Even in defeat though, Dark Samus had one last trick up her sleeve in the form of Aurora Unit 313. Aurora Unit 313 was originally part of the GFS Valhalla, being installed in the ship in 2066, and was noted for performing as one of the most successful Aurora units ever made. And while it was noted that 313 had shown an unusually high aggression potential, considering its commendable combat performance, it was a concerning detail that was swept under the rug by the higher members of the Galactic Federation. However, this changed drastically when the Aurora unit was removed by the Phazon space pirates after an attack on the GFS Valhalla at the cost of the lives of the entire crew, before being corrupted by Dark Samus and plugged straight into the heart of planet Phaaze, the Sanctum. There, it slowly melded with the planet and became enriched in Phazon from deep below the surface, undergoing complete and total corruption and becoming the literal mind and soul of Phaaze. Using Aurora Unit 313 as an interface, Dark Samus was not only able to accelerate the production of Leviathans, but also send a Phazon-based virus into all of the other Aurora units to cripple and force them to shut down, starting the countdown to the Phazon Crisis. While the Federation was able to disconnect the line and keep some of its Aurora units safe while others, like 217, were healed with a powerful antivirus, it was not until the very end of the Hunter's journey after defeating Dark Samus that she would come face to face with this monster. Desperate to survive and destroy her enemy, Dark Samus merged with it and took full control over Aurora Unit 313, and with that, their final battle was set. In its base form, Aurora Unit 313 was connected to the heart of the planet by a large cable, which was present in other Aurora units but was usually tucked underneath their main body. 313, on the other hand, used it to tower over the Hunter as the machine mocked her. A weak spot, namely 313's main energy core, was detected by the Hunter at the junction point between the unit and its cable, but she was unable to get to it as a result of the connecting cable blocking it from attack. The only way to get to it directly was to damage the main unit enough to force it to disconnect. The machine would mainly hover in the air and release Phazon tentacles from the 4 ports on the side of its body. These tentacles would fire Phazon energy orbs if left unchecked, but they are otherwise easy to destroy if only just a bit hard to hit due to the thin profile. Damaging these tentacles would leave an open port at which the Hunter could fire her Phazon hyper beam in the hopes of overloading the machine. This could also be done by attacking a maintenance unit that occasionally stuck out of one of the portholes, and if she was quick enough to hit it, it would expose all 4 of the portholes for her to target. Once sufficient damage was dealt, it would cause the Aurora unit to fall down to the ground stunned. By rushing over to its head and using the grapple lasso to open up a hatch on the top of the unit's head, it revealed the biological brain matter that gives the Aurora unit its definition as an organic machine, which could then be targeted to deal direct damage to the energy core on the opposite side of the head. As the monster rose up after being stunned though, it would cackle on the Hunter's face and proceed to utilize a special attack to distract her. In one instance, the unit would simply nest itself in the center of the area and allow a sextet of cannons to launch massive energy projectiles at the hunter. In other cases, the machine would instead fire a large energy laser of dark energy over the battlefield, sweeping it back and forth trying to hit her. Finally, if it was really desperate, the machine could summon a number of dark echoes to do its bidding, though these copies were much more ethereal in form than the dark echoes produced by Dark Samus and took less damage to destroy. It took a while for the hunter to inflict direct damage against the machine, but eventually she was able to utilize cerebral feedback pulses from attacks on its Phazon tentacles to stun it and give her the chance to finish it off. However, the battle was not over just yet. While the feedback eventually into the Aurora unit caused the cable connecting it to the core of the planet to be severed as the hunter intended it to, 313 was still able to fly into the air and remain functional on its own. In this form, her target was the spot where the cable had been attached, the main energy core of the monster, but it had a number of different attacks still at its disposal. Much like Metroid Prime's core essence, the machine could extend a node from the bottom of its body that could charge up and send a massive energy wave across the battlefield, but shooting it enough could disable it and stun the Aurora unit, leaving it open to counterattack. As an alternative, the unit could also power up and fire a quartet of lasers from small nodes on its body, which would sweep across the area and rotate around as it did so, though this attack could also make it easier to hit its weak point as it moved around. If a direct attack was needed, the machine could power up and fire a couple massive bursts of Phazon energy, guaranteed to deal incredible damage against anything that it hit, but the power surge was also enough to stun the machine after using it. Lastly, the detached Aurora unit could slam into the ground and start to rotate and bounce around the area. This could make it very difficult to avoid, but a few key shots to its core, or a precise hit from a screw attack, could stun it for a considerable amount of time. Overall, the Aurora unit was definitely a powerful foe, and having to fight it after Dark Samus made it extremely difficult for the hunter to survive its onslaught, but with time and patience, she was able to finally fell the beast and critically damage its energy core. As the devastated Aurora unit fell to the ground, its entire body shrunk and imploded inwards on Dark Samus, revealing her as her form destabilized from critical overload, killing both monsters at the same time. In the death of 313, the planet lost all form of sentience and could no longer hold itself together, overloading and ultimately detonating in a glorious blaze of destruction that not only destroyed the Phazon space pirates, but every single source of Phazon in the process, ending the Phazon Crisis once and for all. After a long and extremely arduous journey, with the battle over, the galaxy was finally saved from the corruption of Phazon once and for all. But this does not belittle how dangerous the entire situation was at its peak and final moments. Even if it had never been intended for a combat role on its own, Aurora Unit 313 was still a nightmare of a machine that proved that entities like Mother Brain can come in many different shapes and sizes. And while it may now be gone, there is no denying that it rivaled Dark Samus in its power and overall corruptive potential, and for that deserves a special category of its own as well. Threat level Heart of Phaaze. To say the least, it is a very, very good thing that this planet no longer exists, for the sake of all life in the galaxy and perhaps even the known universe. The planet was so far away from the sight of most that it is a wonder that it was ever discovered at all, though the creation and release of so many Leviathans in our reach of the universe likely did help in keeping itself hidden from others. While the adventures of the Hunter interactions helped to not just stem the corruption of Phazon, but destroy it all outright, the incredibly unique biota of the planet was barely scratched upon her descent towards the heart of it all, and in truth, I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. It is true that much scientific study may have been robbed from some, but even with their association, science team and I agree that this world was never safe for any explorers to venture towards, and its destruction is a welcome blessing for all. As such, this planet gets what could likely be the highest threat level assignment to a planet that could possibly be given, and we all hope here that a planet like it is never found again. At least not without the aid of the Hunter once more. And with that, we have finally managed to make it through all the different worlds and locations commonly associated with the events of the Phazon Crisis, from its very beginning to its very end. I thank you all for the help you've provided, but sadly Science Team and I will need some time to make preparations for future voyages. Don't think that's going to stop our examination of the biota of the galaxy though, as we recently managed to acquire a massive trove of data on some worlds that are no longer in existence. As such, the next series of info videos are going to be taking us back in time, as we take a look at the world that started the true journey of the Hunter against the forces of the space pirates and others. And that world is Planet Zebes. Thank you for reaching the end of this presentation. While we might not always get along, the space pirates and myself, in whatever capacity we can manage, are dedicated to analyzing and examining the life forms of many different worlds extant and extinct, to show the great variety of life that exists out within the greater cosmos. If you enjoyed this info video and would like to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe for more information. We'll do our best to keep pumping out data so the greater public has an understanding of what to expect when exploring alien planets and their denizens. With that, have a safe journey, and have your bribes prepared beforehand if you happen to come near our territory.